podcast where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And today, folks, we're going to switch things up a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about empathy and how that can apply to your business. Before we do that, let's introduce Vicky Hutchmala from the World Token Market. Vicky, how are you today?
I'm outstandingly wonderful today, Ron. Another excellent day in Vegas. Another excellent guest on our podcast who's going to tell us all about kind of how we can be better people, better leaders, and better entrepreneurs. So let's get started with one of our favorite guests.
Exactly. So let's introduce Thomas Cox. Thomas is the founder of Becoming a Better Boss. Thomas, how you doing over there today?
Doing great, and I'm really glad to be back. I love your show. Empathy is the thing I was hoping we would talk about today. And
yeah, excellent. This is coming at a really good time because I've been getting into a lot of social media fights with people I don't know.
Easier to fight with folks you don't know than those you
do. Yeah, we need to teach Ron empathy.
Yeah.
Well,
yes,
maybe.
Exactly. So, but before we get into the empathy part of this whole thing, Thomas, why don't you tell the viewers who may not have heard the previous podcast we did with you a little bit about yourself and becoming a better boss?
Right. Well, I'm going to correct you. It's called Becoming a Best Boss. And I picked that name because, best. And the reason I picked that name is because I started asking people, who's the best boss you ever had? Because I was trying to figure out what does it mean to be a really exceptional leader. And as I was doing that, I would read everything I get my hands on about this phenomenon of leadership. And over time, what came clear to me is that everybody had basically the same archetype boss, that when they say the best one they ever had, there's always a combination of two things. That they, number one, demanded excellence. They really insisted on you doing your best. If you turned in second-rate work, they'd get in your face and challenge you. But they would challenge you from a place of a strong relationship, of knowing you really well. It wasn't just a blind demand. It was a demand that was illuminated with a real knowledge of and an understanding of who you were as a person and what your personal strengths and weaknesses were, and a lot of really caring about you as a person. So if you do what I've done, I'll ask a room full of 100 people, who's the best boss you ever had, write their initials down on a scrap of paper, and now why them? Why'd you pick that person, not somebody else that you've worked for? And figure out what the answer is and write down 2 or 3 words to anchor that idea. Now, everybody get in groups of 2 and 3 and tell each other about what you wrote. And they'd all stand up and buzz and talk for a while, get very excited, because it's a good memory to think about the best boss you ever had. And then I'd have them all, get into larger groups and summarize and tell the whole room, okay, what are the answers you're getting? And then they'd all say things like, cared about me as a person, or knew my strengths better than I knew myself, or gave me responsibility, had more faith in me than I had in myself, always listened to what I had to say, consulted me in important decisions, encouraged me when I wasn't confident, on and on and on. And you could take every single answer, every answer that anybody gave over, other than done this with thousands of people now. All the answers fall into 2 buckets. One has to do with keeping people psychologically safe, willing to try new things, willing to make mistakes, willing to admit mistakes, willing to offer up new ideas, willing to criticize each other's ideas and be criticized from a place of psychological safety, which requires empathy, by the way. And then the other bucket had to do with really expecting a lot, really challenging people to be their best, not taking their second best work, challenging bad behavior very quickly, setting standards, communicating bad news as well as good news very rapidly, and so on. And these 2 sets of skills were described in detail in a book by a guy named Pete Friedis called The 2R Manager. The 2 R's are relating and requiring. And you have to do both. And when you can do both, you become the best boss your people have ever had. And I'm at the place now where I can turn anybody, pretty much, if you've got basic skills, as a leader and manager, I can turn you into, with work on your part, of course, into the best boss your folks have ever had. And it's because we as humans have this need for a leader who cares about us. And we have to know they care about us before we're willing to submit to them. But once we know they care about us, we're willing to submit to a lot. And so that's why empathy is one of the first skills you have to strengthen if you don't already have it. But if you are already very empathetic, you need to make sure you don't over-empathize, because that could get in the way of you really challenging people to be their best and demanding of them. So let's say you're like most CEOs today, most business owners. They're either technicians, they're very good at some skill, and they've built a business around this thing they're good at, construction, whatever, and they're very task oriented. It's a classic CEO personality profile, is to be very task oriented. And a lot of these folks, and I was this way myself, get very frustrated when folks don't do what they're supposed to do. It's like, what's wrong with you? It's easy. Right. What's wrong? Why don't people do what they're supposed to do, Thomas? And there's actually 17 reasons why people don't do what they're supposed to do, and I have an article on that. But asking it that way is basically the anti-empathy way. It's like, why is this person unable to do the thing I need them to do when I'm pretty sure they probably want to? Like, what's in their way? And when you can with empathy ask them, hey, Fred, I was really hoping, expecting, needing this quality from you on this deadline, and you're not giving it to me. What's going on? What would you need to be true in the world for you to be able to do this for me in future? And that unlocks their problem-solving thinking. It unlocks their taking on responsibility and so on. But you can't get there you can't fake empathy, and you shouldn't try. But what you can do is practice it. You can practice it. And so here's the practice to take home. And you should, not only can you try this on your family, you should, because listening skills are universal. And I routinely have people tell me, you'll never believe what happened. I tried listening to my family, and they really liked it. Like, yeah, I believe you.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe you. It works for me too. And so, but there's a way of listening, right? And so the thing is, a lot of us listen for our turn to talk, or we listen for things to disagree with, or maybe we listen for things to agree with. And all of that's not really empathetic listening. You listen with empathy when you try to hear how it felt for them to have the experience they had. There's a lovely video on YouTube called "It's Not About the Nail." And in this, it's very short and very, very funny. And this woman is sort of talking in very vague terms about some unhappiness she's experiencing, about like pressure that she's feeling. And then finally the camera pulls back far enough, you can see that it looks like a nail has been driven into the middle of her forehead. And of course it's it's a special effect, but you get, and here she's got this big nail. It's like everything she said obviously has to do with this nail in her forehead. And the boyfriend, the guy listening to there, it's like, well, maybe it's because there's a nail in your forehead. And she gets mad at him. She gets mad at him. It's like, you're always trying to fix things. I don't want you to try to fix anything. I just want you to hear me. It's a very classic, male-female gap. But here's the thing to touch on is nobody cares how much you know until first they know how much you care. You have to demonstrate you're on their side emotionally. And the only way to do that for humans is to demonstrate empathy with empathic listening, which has to do with trying to put yourself in their shoes emotionally. And that could be something like, gosh, I imagine that must feel terrible, or wow, I had a somewhat similar experience once, and I know when I went through that it was just awful, or that sounds wonderful, or whatever the emotion is, or I'll sometimes just say, as you're talking about it, I can just see your eyes really lighting up, and I think this really excites you. Right? I haven't said anything about the quality of what they're talking about. I'm talking about their internal state and the fact that I'm noticing it. Right? And so give you some additional background on this. When Google worked on a multi-million-dollar, multi-year study of what makes the best teams, was something called Project Aristotle. And what Project Aristotle was set out to do was to see which teams at Google were the best teams and why were they the best, and is there anything to be learned? Is there any method or formula? And they thought originally that it was like you needed diversity of a certain kind, or you needed like equal numbers of extroverts and introverts, or you needed people with different like ethnic backgrounds, or none of that had anything to do with it. Nothing. What they found was 5 things that did have all the best teams had in common that the worst teams did not have. The first one was psychological safety. And coming up behind that was a deep respect for the emotional reality that each person was experiencing. So if someone looked upset, it was very important that the team lead or somebody say, hey Fred, you seem a little upset. What's up? Right? Not that they would then be responsible for fixing whatever was wrong in Fred's life, okay? That a lot of folks think that if I ask what's wrong, that I have to fix it. No. If you ask what's wrong, you have to listen to what's wrong. And that's all.
Right.
And you can then follow it up with, gosh, what are you thinking you might do about that? Okay, so it's not it doesn't become your problem just because you asked about it. You can keep it their problem and express curiosity. In fact, I'll do this with folks with someone's chronically late to meetings. Like say, gosh, Fred, I noticed that you keep showing up late to meetings, and when you show up late to meetings, it kind of slows us all down. Can you do something differently next time? And then it'll come out that he's having all kinds of problems at home, and I'll say, gosh, tell me more. That sounds really hard. I'm really sorry you're going through that. What are you thinking you want to try to do about it? You know, is there anything in the employee support program that might help you? Do you have their number? What have you tried? What else are you planning to try? And these are all coaching questions, right? I'm not taking the work on myself. But empathy is your gateway to understanding what's happening, and it's also the gateway through which you demonstrate that you care. And when you demonstrate that you care, and you can't fake that. You have to actually take the time to care. You have to let their emotions infect you. You have to let their emotions in, and that can be hard. It scared me actually originally when I first started this myself. I was very low in empathy. That was terrible. And but I was determined, and so I just started practicing. And I would let people's emotions in, and I would feel an echo in me of what they were feeling. And that could be uncomfortable, but I just sat through it and just was present for them. And over time, it's gotten easier to let myself feel what others feel. And when you do that, they feel heard. We all do.
Exactly.
I
think it's...
You do this with your clients. You do this with your staff. You do it with your suppliers. You do it with your family. You do it with yourself even. And what it sets you up to do is be connected as a human being to other humans in a deep way that allows them to trust you and allows you to then, if they work for you, to demand the best. And they want to give their best to someone who cares about them. So empathy to me it's the way to get to know your clients. It's the way to get to know your staff. It's the one of the indispensable stepping stones to leadership excellence. And it's one of the things I coach people on in my practice.
Well, I think that it's a fundamental need of every person to know that somebody cares about them, regardless of what it is. But knowing that somebody taking the time to care about somebody else is pivotal to being, as you say, a good leader. Because if you care about your team, that means that you want them to be their very best and do their very best. And because they can recognize that you care, they will provide the best that they can because they want to please you for caring about them. It's a cyclical thing, I care about you. I want you to be good. I want you to be the best you can, and I will help you be that way. And then they boom right into it, and it's not like an overnight success, as you say. You've got to take little steps to make it happen, but eventually you get there, and that's the sign of a good leader, making their team be the best. When I was a little girl, my father used to always tell me, he'd say, Vic, if you're going to do something, do it the very best that you can, because if you don't, you might as well not do it because it's a waste of your time. And it always stuck with me that if you can't do it the very best, don't do it at all. Let somebody else do it, because you're wasting everyone's time, especially your own. Too much things to do to waste your time doing a inferior job. Even if it's doing the dishes, even because I was little and I was doing the dishes, and he said, if you can't do the dishes, wash the dishes, dry the dishes the very best, then I didn't get out of it, but he would force me to do it. He would reinforce the concept by making me do it over again and say, see, now do it the best you can, and keep doing it until you do it the best you can. And it stuck with me my entire life.
Yeah,
there's
a lot of
important.
That's very, teaching kids and even as adults embracing a love of excellence, it's a very good practice. It helps us in life, and it helps us at work. I remember that Martin Luther King said something that I love reading. Every time I read it, it gives me chills. I'll have to paraphrase it. I don't have it in front of me. It says something to the effect that all work that uplifts humanity is worthy of doing with painstaking excellence.
Exactly.
And if a man is called to be a street sweeper, then let him sweep streets with the same care and quality that Michelangelo or Da Vinci or Galileo did what they did, that the hosts of heaven and earth will pause and look and say, here is a street sweeper who swept streets well. And that kind of caring about quality, everybody loves it. You love to see it. You love to benefit from it. You love to be around it. And we all have that capacity in us to love excellence. And I love the excellence in excellent leadership. And that's why a crucial element like empathy is an important thing to me, that to study it and to be able to teach it the way I do.
And like you said, just because you have the ability to do something and take that ability or skill and create a business out of it, it doesn't mean that you are a good leader or that you know how to manage your company. Just because you can make the best product, you can't be. It doesn't mean you automatically are a good leader. But learning how to be a good leader only enhances your company and the product or the service that you provide, because now you've got a whole team of people doing a quality job, doing the best that they can do. We all have different skills. The street sweeper has a skill for sweeping streets. Somebody else has a skill for, doing blockchain. Somebody else has a skill for creating leaders and teaching leaders. But whatever the skill is, do it the best you can and be proud of it, and everybody else will be appreciative of what you've done.
Yeah, and I'll double down on that and say that if you are in a position where you have to lead people, that to be humble and to take the time to learn to lead well is something that will repay you endlessly throughout life and through your career. You'll make great friendships. People will value you. They'll want to come work for you. Your turnover goes down. Quality goes up. Clients love it. And the workday becomes a joy.
Exactly.
It's work. It's work to get good, but boy, is it worth it.
And plus, you've changed people's lives. You've made people feel better about themselves and about what they do by going back to that basic skill, although not everybody can do it, as you said. But if you have empathy, then that leads you down the path to quality and excellence and changing other people's lives by bringing out the best in them and showing them how to be better than they were And that comes from caring about people and caring about what is going on in their life, which is different from everybody else's life. And just tuning into that, listening to that, focusing on that brings you such rewards as a leader or a business owner that it becomes exponential.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I want to mention that there's this whole idea of relating and requiring. I mentioned the Pete Friedis book that talks about that. That what Pete offered on the relationship side, which is where empathy lives, right? It's in building meaningful relationships with your staff. He said there were 5 key skills, and I'm going to mention them. And you'll notice how empathy is woven in pretty much all of these relating skills. One is about asking. That means asking questions, asking rather than assigning work, asking if people are willing to take things on, so they've got the option to say no, which means when they do say yes, there's more commitment. To listen to what they have to say deeply, to include them in decision-making, to coach them to improve, and to encourage them when they feel scared or discouraged, and to get them to take more chances. And you can perform all 5 of those tasks without empathy, but it's hard. You won't do as good a job. And when you can bring empathy to the game, your ability to ask, listen, include, coach, and encourage effectively is vastly greater. So let's take each of those in turn. So I want to ask, Fred, if Fred will, do the draft this upcoming quarter's quarterly report for me. He's never done it before, but I'm ready for him to take more work on. And I say, hey, Fred, would you be willing to prepare the report? And if I am empathetic in my ask, and I notice what he has how he responds, I can notice if he's enthusiastic, if he's scared, if he's reluctant. He's like, well, if I really have to. It's like, whoa. This is not a punishment, dude. I notice you're feeling a little reluctant. What do you feel you would need before you could be enthusiastic? So, well, I don't really understand how it's done, or it's a really high profile, and if I do it wrong, it's like, your boss's boss will think I'm an idiot. Or it's like, you start to find out things. Or asking also shows up when you see that someone hasn't done something you've told them to do. I love using the example of the stock clerk in the grocery store. You're a grocery store manager, you tell, little Freddie, the grocery store clerk, hey, sweep aisle 3 for me. It's looking messy. Someone spilled some stuff. You come back 20 minutes later, aisle 3 has not been swept. And you're like, dude, I thought I told you to sweep aisle 3. It's been 20 minutes. It doesn't take you 20 minutes to sweep an aisle. But if you ask what's going on, you discover that, just as I was going for my broom, 3 people needed help out to their cars with groceries. And you told us in last week's staff meeting how important customer-facing tasks like that are, and we should always prioritize those. And so I figured you'd want me to prioritize that, boss, and that's why I haven't swept yet. Boy, that's a good answer, isn't it? Makes you glad you asked instead of telling him, you're a bad person because you didn't do what I told you to do. Maybe he was a perfect person.
The other end of that is that the employee is like, my boss is such a pain. He asked me to sweep aisle 3. He asks me every single hour. What's wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
He never gets done.
And at some point you say, I haven't swept it because why? And when he starts running out of excuses, at some point you have to say, is there some reason why sweeping is beneath you? Is there some reason why, if I'm not showing you how to sweep, you feel it's, people don't perform for very specific reasons. They think that there's something else that's more important. They think that it's not their job. They think it's, that they'll get in trouble if they do it and do it badly. They'll get yelled at, and they'd rather just avoid getting yelled at. There's as I say, there's 17 reasons. A guy named Fournier came up with a list from his interviews of 16 reasons, and I added a 17th to my list of reasons why people don't do what bosses think they should do. And you'll never find out what's going on if you don't ask. Listening is the same way.
And, also, if you have empathy, you understand your employees, your team, and you know what their ability is. You know what they're able to do. And if you give them tasks to do that are within their abilities, even if they're little short, small steps, you empower them to do more and to learn more and to be more by giving them goals that they can accomplish and then larger goals that they can excel in. And it's like a stage. It's a step. But it starts with empathy and knowing what they can do and not giving them a job that will freak them out and then come up with 17 excuses for why they haven't done it because it's within their ability.
Yeah.
Right. And when you say excuses, sometimes excuses are really explanations, right? Like I thought something else was more important. Well, that's a really good reason not to do it. Or, I thought it was actually Fred's job. Barney says Fred's job is to do it, and Fred thinks Barney's job is to do it. Okay, they're each expecting the other one to do it. Well, it's my job as the boss to clarify roles and responsibilities. So if they're both stuck, now it's on me to create clarity. People sometimes think that empathy is somehow at odds with demanding excellence, and I want to demonstrate to you that it's not. I had to give a very kind of a challenging message to a guy who was not doing his job for me, and we'd given him a couple chances. He said he'd catch up. He never did catch up, and after several weeks of him making promises and not delivering, I said, put it in an email to him actually to formalize it. I said, so, now paraphrasing here, there are certain expectations that come with this job role that you have. There are certain activities that have to be performed, and when you don't perform those activities, when you don't do the work, this tension arises between you having the title but not doing the work of the title. And there's many ways to resolve that tension. One is you start doing it. The other is we take the title away. And there's maybe other solutions as well, and I look forward to finding those solutions with you. So let's figure out how we resolve that, because you can't keep the title without doing the work of the title. So either you start doing the work or you let go of the title, which means you let go of the job, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
and also, and I'm just saying, look, dude, there's a tension here. Let's resolve it.
Yeah. Thomas, to get back to what you were saying earlier in the podcast about, who was your best boss, and you go back and you look at that, doesn't empathy have some kind of emotional and a level where you might be at one place in your life where you think that would be a good thing, where it really isn't, or vice versa? Like, for example, when I look back at my best boss of my life, I didn't realize that he was my best boss at the time he was my best boss. It was only afterwards, when I got a little smarter, that I realized that this guy was great.
Oh, you got a worse boss.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, right? So there's a component there that has to be considered into this whole empathy equation as well, right? Your emotional quotient, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Often you'll feel, that this person was too demanding, or there was some way in which that they were rubbing up against you, and you kind of wanted to blame them for it, and then you go back to it in retrospect years later when you've grown. You go, wow, the place that he and I were rubbing up against each other is the place that I was weakest, and I really needed to grow, and he was highlighting that. And I didn't like it. I wasn't comfortable with it. And in retrospect, he was absolutely correct, or she was. And, and that's okay, right? I mean, you can only ever view the world through your current level of understanding of it. And because we're humans, we get to grow. And so when I ask a person, who's the best boss you ever had, looking backward from today, they often will reinterpret their past experiences in the light of new learning. And I encourage that. That is how we learn, right? Is we have to rethink our past, that the person we thought was our friend in high school was actually a kind of a bully, or, we thought they were our friends that were really taking advantage of us the whole time, and we only now see that, or, there's just a host of made-for-TV movies on these themes. And that's why I think it's important to have empathy for yourself, that it's okay that at the time you didn't really like that boss. It's okay that we didn't start out in life all fine-tuned and polished and perfectly poised. And it's like you don't start any race at the finish line. You start at the starting line. And, it's a process of getting better. And we may not be perfect, but we can at least improve.
Yeah, and speaking of movies as well, a couple of weeks ago I was watching The Godfather, and I'm sure everyone's seen that movie, right? Yeah, I'm just all of them. Part 1, Part 2, amazing. But my point of the conversation is there's not a lot of empathy in The Godfather. They don't feel empathy a lot. And I think some people associate empathy with a kind of a weakness almost. I mean, do you see that, or how do you fight against that kind of notion?
Well, the only people who think that are the folks who are very task-oriented, very outcome-oriented, and who don't, they don't really feel it themselves. They don't see it themselves. It's like, I'm good. I don't have a lot of empathy. I don't need a lot of empathy from others. Like, what's going on? Why should I bother? And that's, if you recruit a bunch of other task-oriented, low emotional intelligence, low empathy people to work around you, that can work. I've seen organizations like that. But here's the thing. Even people who don't feel a lot of need for empathy still need it. They just don't realize they need it until it's missing in enough quantity. And if all you care about is results, I would direct you back to that Google study of the best teams, that the best teams become the best when they have psychological safety, which can only be achieved through empathy. And what psychological safety gives you is people's willingness to ask for help, admit their mistakes, suggest new ideas, and offer criticism of the status quo. And even the top performing people aren't stupid. If you've got a culture where people get blamed and shamed and lose status if there's a mistake, well, of course they'll hide their mistakes, right? The culture tells them to. Or if everyone thinks you're stupid if you ask a question, and that anybody who asks a question is like pointed out as stupid by other people, great, I'll hide my ignorance. I won't ask for help. I won't ask questions. But if that proliferates through the organization, you're setting yourself up for a lot of public performance, but not a lot of team performance. And Google's results aren't arguable. No one's done as in-depth a study as they've done, but the other studies that have been done absolutely corroborate it. That the best performance, especially in knowledge workers, comes with teams that have high psychological safety and high internal empathy. And if all you care about is results, you should care about that, because that's where the results come from teamwork.
Excellent. Yeah, really good stuff. And, you do a lot of panels and conferences and things like that, right? Weren't you just on one recently?
Oh, gosh, I'm on panels kind of all the time.
That's one way to keep them busy for sure. So if people are listening to this, they want to get more information for sure on this topic and contact you, Thomas. What's the best way to do that?
I would say have them go to my website. It's called becomingabestboss.com, www.becomingabestboss.com. And my contact information is on there, or they could just email me, thomas@uday.biz. That's spelled E-U-D-A-E, uday.biz. Uday is short for eudaimonism, which is the Greek word for the joy we get when we realize our potential as human beings. So uday.biz, thomas@uday.biz, or becomingabestboss.com.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So, Vicki, did we put the word out on empathy today, or what?
We absolutely put the word out, and anybody who doesn't understand the concept after they listen to this podcast, well, we can't help everybody.
Exactly. But our audience is always willing to learn new things for sure. So that's great. Thomas, again, thanks for your time today. I know that obviously you're really, really busy and everything. We really appreciate you coming on our show and explaining this all to our audience. Vicki, thanks so much for co-hosting this podcast with me. And folks, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at mappableusa.com. If you go to that website, you scroll down on the homepage, you'll see all our syndication sources. Just pick the one you like best, subscribe, and you'll never miss another one of our episodes. If you want to be a guest on the show like Thomas was today, there's a guest tab there. Fill that out. We'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. And if you like what you heard today, send us an email at info@mappableusa.com, or just leave a comment on whatever page you're listening to this on right now. So thanks for your support. Thanks for listening. We'll be at you next time with another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.